All right, we are today doing our lecture on log hunting. Share the screen here. All right. Again, I just really have two short slide decks here. So again, we're doing log hunting here. This is a bit after Splunk, right? We're looking through the logs that we can actually catch bad guys in the act, sort of thing. So what are we talking about? Again, indicators of compromise, IOCs, term that's been following us around for at least a few days now. Going to be talking about how we detect attacks, network detections, host detections, and application detections. The three different places we're going to be looking for IOCs. All right. So, firstly, what's an IOC? Explain it to me. Explain it to me like I'm grandma.
Basically, it's a target indicator, something that tells you that someone has been there who shouldn't be there and has left a trace.
I like it. I like it. Right. The highest level is just any kind of evidence left behind by attacks. In the real world, it'll be like, glass broken in a house and, materials are missing. Something like that, right? Something we could look at, so we could say, hey, there's some indication here that something's been compromised. Ugh, use the words inside the definition. Terrible. So give me an example. What's a specific IOC for cybersecurity? Where might you look for one?
Port scanning.
Yeah, and where would you look for that?
Firewall.
Firewall logs.
Yeah, exactly. Right. You look for things, right? No trick questions here, right? Looking in the logs to find the IOCs, right? Give me an example here. I think you basically gave me one, Tim. Someone else give me an example. So I heard looking at scans, right? Potentially scans inside the logs. What else might we see inside logs that might be an IOC?
Network traffic that comes through like 1 second, one right after the other, right after the other, right after the other.
Okay, so maybe network traffic that looks weird, not part of the standard baseline. Sure. What else might we see inside logs?
Large amount of failed logins.
For sure. All right. Got all these things. What requests are made, any errors, right? Failed logins, any actions taken, someone successfully completes any of these things, right? Any of these things are things we can expect to see inside the logs that would be an indicator of compromise. And so we have three different real indicators of compromise, places we can look. We have the logs, the artifacts, and metrics. And so logs are, right, the log files themselves. And this is where we'll see those things. In addition to logs, we'll see artifacts. This will be, right, accounts made. You log into a new machine, you see a new account, you're like, oh, that's funny, right? This is an artifact of some indicator of compromise. This might be, the way that they're getting back in. You might see new services running on the machine. You might see new machines themselves, right? A new switch shows up on the network. A new wireless access point shows up on the network. Right? These are all considered artifacts of indicators of compromise. And finally, like you were saying before, we have metrics of indicators of compromise too, right? Things like your services go down, any kind of strange activity, right? Things like any looking at the trends, right? Anything that looks different, we should be a little bit suspicious of, right? All three of these things are the indicators of compromise, right? Or at least where we're going to be looking for are indicators of compromise. Right? So you could categorize all of them into things you'll find in logs, specific artifacts you'll find, right? So maybe we find out one APT, one group of threats like to use this particular, once they get an account or once they have a foothold on the machine, they like to install this particular service so that they can, get higher privileges, right? That might be why you'd be looking for software or services that are unauthorized, right? Imagine, Black Hats, they get on a machine, right? They've added it to their botnet as a new node, and the new software that they'll install is Mimikatz, so they can elevate privileges and, maybe do some more stuff there, right? Cool. And again, the metrics thing you'll be looking at, like network flow, usage of all components, things like that. And so how do we detect attacks, right? How do we know if we've already been breached? Most of the time, we find out that we've been breached after, I want to say that the average I've seen is like 90 days, the earliest. That's when we find out we have enough evidence to determine that we've actually been breached. And we have to start looking back, right? But how do we know? All of these things, right? These are the things that pop up for us to look for, right? Alerts pop up from either our IDS or IPS system. We go do an investigation, right? Maybe our SIM pops an anomaly, right? Some protocol is not behaving properly, do an investigation, right? Little reports pop up, different attackers. We have different kind of service issues. This is where we do our detection, right? So here's the process. You get a report, you investigate the issue, right? Get an alert, you investigate the issue. That's going to be our job as SOC analysts. How do we do it? You create your hypotheses and then you look for evidence, right? It's kind of like scientific method sort of thing here. An alert pops up, right? You say unauthorized logins, 5 logins within 1 hour. What's your hypothesis? It depends on your organization, depends on the company. Do you have a particular manager that just forgets their passwords? Do we have a password policy in place where maybe every 3 months passwords need to be rotated? That just happened and everyone forgets their password and that's why they're all screwing it up. I don't know, right? You're going to be the one that has the context for your data. Point is, you make your hypotheses and then you look for the evidence, right? Then you make your conclusions with your reasoning and your supporting evidence. This is the idea here where when we make you write your PCAP reports, right? I don't care so much about the answer. I also want your evidence and your reasoning. Show me what is it that you saw and the instructions so that I can see it, and give me the reasoning so that if I'm looking at exactly what you're looking at, that makes sense to me. Okay, right? If the hypotheses were this is just people making mistakes because a password policy just changed, show me that, right? Show me that documentation that passwords just changed. If it's not, right, you think it was actually some kind of attack, show me that. Either way, right? We're going to make some hypotheses, look for the evidence, and answer things with this answer evidence reasoning format to make things clear. Okay. So we have different places to look for IOCs. Right, we have the network itself, where all the traffic coming through. We have the individual hosts, and we have the applications themselves. So let's talk about network detections, right? When I talk about network detections, where are they? What are the logs that we're collecting? What type of logs have to do with network?
Syslogs.
So syslog, elaborate.
They're like the system logs. Like, if, for example, if a network goes down, it's logged in the system logs.
Okay. I'll take syslog in general, but if we want to be more specific, what type of devices make network logs? Like logs that would be talking about things that are happening over the network.
Firewall,
Firewalls. What else?
IDS, IPS.
Oh, what else?
Routers.
Yeah.
modems.
Yeah. What other protocols do we know talk about networks?
DNS.
Potentially. There's one particular and it's in the name.
Network server logs.
I would not say server logs necessarily for detecting things on a network. Maybe elaborate.
Like if someone was trying to access a particular server at a particular time, maybe something like that.
Okay, I'll give it to you. The ones I've got wrote down that we're looking for, right? These types of logs. I should add firewall there too. Oh, I think I do have that on the next one though, right? Routers, looking at where the traffic's flowing, right? Armon is network monitoring data. SNMP is the simple network managing protocol, right? So you'd be looking at this for network data. You'd be looking through using your scanners, right? Ping, any kind of network mapping, using taps, network taps that are able to capture all the data as it's going through and save it somewhere to a capture. You said before firewalls, right? Taking a look at those logs so that we can know what's allowed through and what's not allowed through. Right? And so we talk about where are these alerts coming from? They're coming from our defenses. It was, I don't know who said it, said your IDS and IPS systems, they're coming from your firewalls, they're coming from your routers, right? All of those devices are what are creating the logs that we're going to look at to see if our network has been breached. Okay? So that's network detections.
Matt, I don't mean to quibble,
Yeah.
but okay, firewalls and IDSs, are those devices or software?
They can be both. They can be both. You can have a hardware firewall and you can have software firewalls like IP tables.
Okay.
And it's not a quibble. Good question. You can have both. All right. So we got types of networks, issues and attacks, right? So what would be a network IOC? I'll give you guys one because you gave it to me before. Traffic spikes. I'll say that's a potential network IOC. What other kinds of things would you look at on a network to be an IOC? And we've said some of them before, so no trick questions.
Data movement, or is that traffic spike?
Yeah, I'll take that as traffic spikes. But you know, keep going, keep going. So to phrase the question, if it helps, you're thinking about looking at any of these types of logs, right, that we talked about, firewall, IDS, IPS, PCAPs, right? What would you look through those things for? What type of behaviors? And the first one I said was traffic spikes.
You can see if any of the clients are beaconing back to the mothership.
Hell yeah, right? Look for some kind of beaconing behavior. That'd be something you'd see in a network detection. What else? What else have you seen in PCAPs? What behaviors have you seen?
Like if there are any type of port scanning that's being done.
Hell yeah, right? You see some kind of port scanning. That is definitely a network IOC, unless you already had some kind of planned, we're doing a vulnerability scan. I don't expect anybody else on my network to be scanning things. So that is an IOC to me. What else?
Subnet ping sweep.
Yeah, ping sweeps, right? Potentially. Like, so there's some cases where there may be, yeah, but it could be an IOC. I'll take it. It could be an IOC. I guess most of them, right? Scans, any kind of probes, denial of service attacks. We mentioned those, right? Rogue devices. Anytime we see anything new on the network, any link failures, beaconing behaviors, right? All of those things. When you're looking at network data, right? These are the IOCs to be aware of, right? These are the things that you might potentially see in network data, right? How do we deal with it? We have tools to prioritize our alerts, right? That's the whole point of the SIM. Just because you see things that are vulnerable doesn't mean it's a big deal if there's nothing on it, right? So what tools do we have available to us to actually do things? We use our intrusion prevention system, right? We can block traffic, stop traffic, send things over to black holes so we don't get a request from them. Third-party providers, right? If we're using Cloudflare or something, for their DOS protection, right? We have that. We have our network maps to look at if something breaks. Talk about that. And then, right, just like what, again, I'll keep harping back to us, perfect timing, just like what Dan said, right? Think about CIA and is security even an issue with this thing, right? Does it matter, right? Is it a big deal if this thing gets hacked? Maybe, maybe not, right? No one's going to care if you secure something that no one cares about, though. So that's important to keep in mind. All right. All right. So that's looking through everything on a network. Let's talk about hosts. What kind of logs are we collecting on hosts? What's a host?
Event log.
Yeah. Got Windows event log. What other kinds of things would you see? What would you look for? Some of you have answered this. Some of you have heard things that are on my list already. Well, I know, we're looking for data that's on the hosts. So what kind of stuff would we see on a host that'll say that, hey, this computer is probably hacked? When I'm talking about hosts now, I'm just going to be general. I'll say like Windows workstations and like laptops. I'm not going to talk about phones and stuff for now, but just general hosts like that.
New
Looking-
programs or files?
Yeah, right. I see some malicious processes or new programs. I see Mimikatz on a new machine that's not a penetration testing machine. Definite IOC. It's like, wait, why is that there? What else?
Syslogs.
What do you mean by syslogs?
So it shows the entirety of what's going on within your host.
Okay. Let's be more specific here. So what things would you look at on a host that will tell you that it's compromised? That'll be an indicator that it's compromised. So what we got right now is Wex is telling me looking for new software that's on it. What else?
New users on that host.
Oh yeah, right. You got new users on this machine. What's that all about? What else?
Privileges.
All right, you have privileges that are misconfigured or set so that someone's able to do something that they might not normally be able to do. Absolutely, I think that'd be an IOC. Here's one you're going to kick yourself if you think about a processor or some kind of consumption like that. I know a few years back, what was pretty popular was this malware that would it would turn you into a crypto miner. I don't know if you guys have heard of that one, right? Essentially, you get that on a whole bunch of bots, have them mine crypto for you, right? So maybe look at your processor consumption. Might be something to pay attention to, right? All those things that you had mentioned and more. I'll even include hardware, right? We talked about software, but also hardware. It'd be something to pay attention to, right? People bringing in their own devices and plugging them in, both benign and maliciously. Right. Looking at things like monitoring tools, right? What monitoring tools will you be able to use for Windows? These are the ones that you should be at least familiar by name. Perfmon, Resmon, sysinternals, right? If you see Mon, it's for monitoring. For Linux, we got these tools, right? PS, right? PSAUX, top, DF and W, right? You can use those tools so that you can see what's going on a host, right? Where are the alerts coming from? Some kind of central logging tools or your SIM. They're also coming from antivirus, authentication, right? All of those sorts of logs as you're going to be paying attention to on a host. And when I say host, I'm specifically like think in your head like a Windows laptop or like a MacBook, right? That you would assign to, a new employee or something like that, right? So in general, for Windows, you got Perfmon, Resmon, sysinternals to take a look at those. In Linux, you're already familiar, PS and top. Those are the big ones. Okay. So that's hosts. Let's talk applications now. Next level up, right? Talk about where and what logs are we collecting. There's going to be some overlap here between hosts, right? What am I going to look for inside an application that says potentially it's been hacked? Think of an application like the WordPress site that we've hacked before, right? What are we going to be looking for?
New users?
Sure. New users, new accounts. What else?
It's accessing files that it's not supposed to.
For sure, right? Perhaps looking in the logs for some strange usage in there. I'd say even looking inside the databases, right? What we might see some kind of attempts at SQL injection, right? Trying to get in that way. Any kind of strange accounts that we'll see. Any kind of new files that get uploaded, right? Any types of those things. Anytime we break the app, right? If you break the app, definitely could be an indicator of compromise. We've broken apps as we were trying to get in, right? What type of events? What are we looking for? Anomalous activity, right? Things that don't follow the established protocols. We're looking at new accounts, paying attention to AAA, authorization and accounting, and authentication. We're looking for any kind of unexpected outputs, things that break, 500 errors from servers, right? Anything that just is like, hey, that's weird, potential IOC, right? That's the sort of bias that I want you guys to have. Hey, that's weird. Are we being hacked? Right. Unexpected outbound communications between the applications, right? This could also be a network IOC, but I'm gonna place it here. Any kind of service interruptions where you break the app, potential IOC. Memory overflows, right? We did buffer overflows. We broke a bunch of apps with buffer overflow. So definitely a app IOC. Okay. Cool. So summary. IOCs, what are they now, right? We should be able to explain it to anybody, explain it to your grandma, right? It's the evidence that something bad has happened, right? This is what what's going to prompt you. We talked about how you're going to detect these different attacks and issues. And we looked at the 3 different places where the IOCs will live, right? They're going to live either in your networks and then in the network data. They're going to live on the hosts themselves and in the host data, or they're going to live in the applications themselves. Okay, these are the 3 places we look for the IOCs. This is where the evidence of being attacked actually is. Cool. So with that, let's talk about, let's advance this. And this is where it gets, I think, super fun. Share real quick. And we're going to talk about the MITRE ATT&CK framework now. And this is, I personally think this is one of the more cool things that we do in Blue Team. Not that everything we do isn't cool, but I like this because we get to like role play, talk high level, and I like being able to share this with you. So MITRE ATT&CK is just one framework. There are 3 that I want you to be familiar with, but MITRE ATT&CK is the one we're going to really dive into. It's the more advanced one, right? So what are we talking about? Talking about the MITRE ATT&CK framework. I'm going to give you a look through an example. And that's about it, right? This is going to be a pretty short demo. So again, I said there's a couple of frameworks that you should know about. And again, a framework is just like a way of thinking about something, some guidance, right? That we're going to be building around, right? It's like a framework for a building. We build around it. So the first one that I want you to be familiar with, and you may have heard of before, is the Lockheed Martin cyber kill chain. We'll go take a look at that. The other one that I want you to at least have heard of is the diamond intrusion analysis framework. I'm not going to look at that one at all, but let's look at the Lockheed Martin kill chain first. Again, from our friends at at Lockheed Martin, I'll send a link to you here, but it is a way of modeling how adversaries behave. Okay, so it's very linear, and it's 8 steps for how you want to model APTs, right? So again, just let's make this a little larger so you can take a look. And what do we know about APTs? They're advanced, they're targeted, right? They have specific goals in mind that are purposeful. They're persistent, they're going to be there every day. They don't sleep. They are not, they're waiting for you to make a mistake and ready to pounce. And they have intent and capability. And they're actually out there, right? I imagine it as like we're all out in the ocean, and these are those Leviathan class beasts that are below us, just underneath the surface that we can't even see. Okay. And this is one way of modeling how they behave. Again, Lockheed Martin came out with this, so it has a lot of, I guess I would say, militaristic terms, but I think that makes sense. Hacking is, offensive and kind of violent in nature, so it makes sense. But, it's stepwise and linear. So I want you to know that about cyber kill chain. First part is reconnaissance, and, this should look familiar to us. It's what we've done before, right? This is where you get your information. Harvest email credentials, see what types of servers and technologies and hardware, software that your target is using. Once you do that, right, it's like finding the vulnerabilities essentially. Usually passive, could include active. Okay. Second step is called weaponization. This is where you take you find your vulnerability and you combine it with some kind of like a backdoor payload. Right. So for example, I found last cohort, we were doing cross-site scripting, and I found cross-site scripting vulnerability on a website where we were doing a demo. That was like doing my reconnaissance, but I was not able to, take that cross-site scripting vulnerability and somehow, use that to do something for me. Right. I didn't weaponize it yet. So being able to take the vulnerability and add, take your exploit and add your payload, that's the weaponization phase, right? You haven't actually done anything yet. You're just building a weapon. You follow up with delivery, and this is what we've done, right? There's a whole bunch of different methods you can use for delivery. We've used FTP, we used HTTP, right? But there's real world delivery too. USB key drop, right? Getting someone, sending someone an email and getting them to click it, right? That whole process of taking your weapon and getting it onto your target, that's the delivery phase. After delivery, we have exploitation, right? This is the moment that your target clicks that link in the email, or the moment your target plugs that USB into their machine and the autoplay exploits the code or runs the code, right? So it's that exact time when that happens, right? That's where the exploitation phase. After that, it's installation, right? The exploit has gone through. We install malware on the asset, right? That's going to be essentially something like we put in some dropper, and now it's going to reach back to the command and control server, right? Us Black Hats, we have a big server. We have perhaps some kind of dashboard that'll let us know all of the bots that we've hacked. And now we got to do things with these bots. Maybe we'll install more tools so that we can either, get more credentials and elevate our privileges, do more reconnaissance, right? This is that phase where we're establishing that channel to the C2 server. And then finally, right, the whole point of APT's hacking is they have objectives. It might be financial, might be political, might be economic objectives, but there's a reason that they're hacking, and it's not just for fun, right? And this is when they're going to actually act on those objectives. Okay, so that's quick run through of Lockheed Martin Cyber Kill Chain. I'll link this in the Slack. But important to know is that it's a thing that's real and out there. Be somewhat familiar with it, and know that it's linear, right? This is a very linear process of thinking about how bad guys work, right? They go from one step to the next step. Okay, cool. That's good to get us into here to the MITRE ATT&CK framework and how that's different. Okay, so what is MITRE ATT&CK other than having a cool name? One, it's a knowledge base for adversarial techniques and tactics, right? This is, I want you to think of, I imagine it as like like techniques for evil, almost like a book for fighting, maybe. We could describe it as that, right? These are the things that we know that are effective and that are actually out there in the wild, right? So it's standard industry lexicon, right? So the vocabulary in MITRE ATT&CK is vocabulary that you should be familiar with. It's stuff that you might hear on job interviews, and you want to be able to speak the language. So it's important that we understand this framework. So what are techniques and tactics? How can we describe them? Well, tactics are the why, right? They are the why of an attack technique or sub-technique, right? It's the adversary's tactical goal, right? The reason that they're performing an action. An adversary may want to achieve credentialed access, right? So those are their tactics to do it. We have the techniques, the how they're going to do it, right? Adversary achieves a tactical goal by performing an action. So an adversary may dump credentials to get credentialed access. That's the technique for the tactic. And we have the procedure. These are the details, right? The specific implementation that our adversary is using for their techniques or sub-techniques. So the procedure could be using PowerShell to inject LSAS.x, something like that, to dump credentials and scrape the memory on a victim, right? The specific procedures that they used for that, right? So the procedures are categorized in attack as they are observed in the real world. You will get to see real world cases of bad guys doing bad things, right? They literally have the examples in the technique pages. Okay. And again, there's the link there at attack.mitre.org. I'll again link it. And we'll look at this specific technique, T1038. So what is it going to look like? This is the older version of the matrix for the MITRE ATT&CK. I think there's only like 2 differences. They've added a couple more columns last year, I want to say. And you can see it's a little bit different than the Lockheed Martin Cyber Kill Chain. I think on the first day of Blue Team, I told you, right, if we started Blue Team first, you're going to be thinking in terms of checklists. And you can't think in terms of checklists because you got to think in terms of graphs and 3 dimensions here, right? So you could see this is not linear at all. This is instead split up by columns and cells. And so if you take a look at the top, you'll see all of these different tactics here, right? Getting initial access, getting execution, establishing persistence, doing your privilege escalation, right? Getting credentialed access, and all of the other things that you may see similar to the Lockheed Martin cyber kill chain. The new columns, just so that you're aware, that were added, I believe was called impact. So this is if your tactic is to have some kind of impact on an organization or business. So that one's a new one that was added. The way I like to think of it is like, think of Mr. Robot season 1, right? What did our protagonists want to do? They wanted to, destroy data to have an impact on the world economy. So it would be under there, right? It's literally under the framework. So let's look at a specific one. If we click down into T103, the DLL search order hijacking, I don't know where that is under, I think it's under Privesk or here, might not be under it, but this is what it looks like when we actually click under it. Right, so it gives you an absolute description of the tactic, right? It's under persistence, privilege escalation, and defense evasion, right? This is what the bad guys are trying to do. They're trying to get persistence. They're trying to elevate their privileges, and they're trying to hide from you. This is the technique right here, DLL search order hijacking. Did you guys know anything about it before? No, but that's okay, right? Because now we have this repository of information that explains it. It's like the Pokédex of bad guy techniques, right? You can read literally what Dexter has to say about adversaries doing DLL hijacking and show you specific examples of APTs that have done it, right? So shows you what permissions are required to do this particular technique, says, specific examples. I don't think it has it right here, but I'll show you specific examples. Oh, here it is. I got it on the next slide. Right, here are specific procedure examples. Right, so if we take a look at MenuPass, right? MenuPass is one example of malware that's been out there that was used for DLL search order hijacking. You could follow it, click, get more information, find out which APTs were doing it and why, right? So that you can better update your defenses. Okay, what else does it give you? Boom, gives you the answers too. How do we mitigate these threats? Well, here are some solutions, right? You audit, right? We're aware of an APT that does DLL hijacking. These are the things that we should have in mind as solutions. That doesn't give you direct solutions, but this is the starting point, right? This is the publicly sourced starting point for what you should be doing if you're worried about these specific threats using this MITRE ATT&CK framework here. Right, so you'll potentially audit the tools that might detect for DLL search hijacking. Right, you might do some kind of execution prevention so that they can't use that technique. Right, you might restrict which libraries are able to download remote DLLs. Right, all of these things are different mitigations that you might potentially be using to better secure yourself. Now that you know that this is something that's out there. Okay, so we'll take a look at one. What is MITRE ATT&CK? Right, think of it your dictionary, your language for attacks. I like to think of it as like a Pokédex so that you can see all the different moves that are out there, right? It has all of the techniques, has all of the tactics, and it has all of these procedures. You'll see this out there. You'll see people talk about TTPs pretty commonly. You'll definitely hear TTP more than you'll hear tactics, techniques, procedures. And this is what we're talking about, the specific MITRE framework and the specific things that these bad guys do. So let's take a quick look. Again, I want you all to take a look at these as well. It's interactive when you're actually like using it on their website. Here, I'll just put it in Slack right now, just so that in case you do want to just be looking at it while I am, you can. Right, so you'll get here. It shows you each of these. I want to say it's 14 columns. Here's the newest one, impact, that was just added. Right, exactly right. Data destruction. Right, Mr. Robot season 1 right there. You could even take a look at it. Right. We have adversaries. Why would they do data destruction on specific file systems and large networks, right? What are they trying to do? Maximize impact on target organizations. Here are some specific examples of it. All right, let's take a look. APT38, I'm not super familiar with them, but they use this custom secure delete function to make deleted files unrecoverable. That sounds terrible. On Monday, we'll learn how we can recover some deleted files, but these guys figured a way to break that, right? We can follow this down. I kind of, if you guys are familiar with the website TV Tropes, this is kind of similar to that, except with cyber, right? You can just keep following down rabbit holes of more and more interesting stuff, right? What if I'm worried about APT38? Here I find out about APT38. Some North Koreans that are financially motivated. If I'm running a bank or something, right, where I have a lot of finance information, if I feel as though I'm a potential target, right, to North Korean regime, this is something I'm going to be paying attention to now. Right? If I potentially do banking with a lot of Asian countries, or where I'm worried, I feel like I have an attack surface to this North Korean regime, this is something I'm going to now be worried about. It's on my radar. Right? Maybe I'm worried about Lazarus Group. That's another group there. And you can see specific examples that are used by now APT38. Right? What do they do? All of these enterprise ones, different software to be aware of, right? You have a whole list of a whole dictionary of things to follow with this. And so I want to make sure that you're aware that it's out there, and bookmark it, and really just kind of take a look at it every day, or every bit of time when you're interested, because this is the publicly available information that's out there, right? When I talk about Blue Team being all about sharing information with other SOCs, this is what I'm talking about here. I forget which organization started MITRE. I want to say it came out of MIT, and now it's like some public thing. Yep. All right. So what are we going to be working on today?